What's up, guys? Very special video today. We're going to be talking about 5 route running tips that all wide receivers need to know. We're going to be talking about how you guys can get faster cuts, how you guys can get faster in general, how to get in and out of breaks in 3 steps or less, everything that has to do with route running that you must know. So I hope this video helps you guys out, but also, fellas, if you're a receiver and you would like to train with us this off season, we are coming out to 15 different cities across the U.S. for 2-day long QB and wide receiver camps. Next up on our camp tour, we're going to be coming out to San Francisco, California, Miami, Florida, Las Vegas, Nevada. All 3 of those camps are completely sold out. But then we'll be heading out to Charlotte, North Carolina, Portland, Oregon, Dallas, Texas, Nashville, Tennessee, Buffalo, New York, Chicago, Illinois. Then we'll be coming out to Atlanta, Georgia, Houston, Texas, Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, Detroit, Michigan, Boise, Idaho, and Los Angeles, California. So if you guys, again, would like some more information, how you could sign up, check out that very first link in the description below. We'd love to have you out to one of our camps. Let's get started with this video. All right, so the first tip I want to talk about for route running for wide receivers is going to be selling vertical. So you look at this out route here from Calvin Ridley all the way up into the break. Everything looks like he is running a fade until it is not a fade, right? So what does that exactly mean? So anytime you got a DB guarding you, whether it's, press man-to-man coverage right off the line, he's right lined up in front of my face, maybe he's inside shade, I take an outside release, the DB is off in zone coverage like this coach is standing right here, we have to make him think that we are running deep, especially when it's a single move route, like an out route, a corner route, a curl route, a post route. And this is the foundation of route running, I would say, is this is what gets the DB to bail, gets the DB to backpedal, and can get us more separation. So there's 3 specific things you want to think about when selling vertical. Number 1, you obviously want to make sure that you are running hard. Now, there's a lot of opinions out there about, different wide receiver coaches will say, oh, you want to run full speed. And then some wide receiver coaches will say, you never want to run full speed because that's going to be very, very tough to change direction. Now, listen, I understand both sides, and I would say it's more so like a controlled full speed. I wouldn't say it's a 40-yard dash full speed where you're, head down, pumping your arms, try to be as explosive as possible, but it is definitely not a 75% or 85% run because that's just not going to be fast enough to threaten a DB. I would say it's about 95 to 97% good under controlled full speed run. Now, the second thing that's going to tie into selling fade is going to be your stride length. And that obviously ties into your speed as well. When we run as wide receivers, as athletes, as football players, we're not trying to take short strides. I don't want my toes facing down. I don't want my knees facing down. I want to be snatching my knees up to like my waist, and I want to be staying in that 90-degree angle, like basic running form mechanics. But those long strides, if I see a DB or if I'm a DB and I see a guy running hard with long strides, I'm automatically thinking he's trying to run past me. A lot of wide receivers, right before they break, what they will do is they will slow their speed down because they're not confident in the cut. And we're going to talk more about cutting later as this video goes on, but they're not confident in the cut. So what they will do is they will start to chop their feet, shorten their stride to prepare for this break. And that is something called an indicator. We want to eliminate all indicators on my route. So we got to make sure that we have good speed, got to make sure we have good stride, and you should be able to take a photograph of your pad level at, like, let's say the break's at 12 yards, at 5 yards, and it should be the exact same at 12 yards. So you want a photograph pad level. It should be the exact same forward lean with your upper half leading all the way up into the break. Another thing wide receivers will do, and again, I think wide receivers do this because it helps them slow down and it helps them prepare for the break because they're maybe not comfortable with the break, is they will raise their chest up. They will pop their chin up. And if you got a DB, especially a DB who's lined up in press coverage or off-man coverage, his eyes are going to be watching my hips. And if he sees my hips start to raise up right before I make a cut, that is an indicator, and he is going to stop thinking it's a fade. He's going to stop his feet and be able to drive on this route. So if we can maintain all 3 of those things, good speed, a controlled full speed, good full strides, and good body language, it is going to be very, very tough for a DB to think anything else other than a fade. So let's play this thing full speed one more time. So first tip of running great routes for wide receivers, you have to sell vertical. Second thing I want to talk about is cut speed at the top of the break. So we're going to be showing a bad example of a wide receiver making a cut. It's not even necessarily a bad example. It's just going to be a slower example. And then we're going to show Calvin Ridley make a cut second. And I want to talk about why Calvin Ridley's cut is way faster than this wide receiver and how all wide receivers can apply this to their cuts. So let's play at full speed. So he comes in. Now again, not a bad break, seems fine, but when you look at Calvin Ridley run this route and you see how much faster he is able to get in and out of the break. I'm going to play that again one more time so you guys can see it again. And everything about this cut has to do with something called foot strike. So this applies for cuts for wide receivers because, like, there are 2 types of cuts, I would say, for wide receivers, right? There's obviously more than that. but two general cuts that you want to know how to do. You want to know cuts like, let's say it's a curl, let's say it's a dig, let's say it's a comeback, where you drop your hips. And then there are cuts like the last example, maybe like a speed cut out route or like a post route where you're cutting off of one foot, right? On either one of these cuts, you have to be mindful of your foot strike, because your foot strike is what's going to create speed. I think we all can agree, like if Calvin Ridley were to race somebody, right, who is like similar speeds, but the person he was racing was running and his heel was hitting the ground first on every single step he took, and Calvin Ridley was staying on the ball of his foot, who do you think would be faster? Calvin Ridley, because the ball of your foot is the more explosive part of your foot. So we look at this first wide receiver get into this break, and it's going to help you slow down, but I want you to pay attention to the first part of his foot that hits the ground. What hits first? You see how his heel is making contact with the ground, his toe is slapping down. So what that causes is almost like, and not even so much a hyperextension. That can happen, by the way, if you reach a little bit far. But you see how his body weight is shifted back. We want my energy and we want my feet to stay inside of my body frame, because that's where I'm the most explosive, right? Like, let's say, for example, like, let's say you're a boxer, right? And you're standing with your feet crazy wide outside your frame and you're standing straight up and down. You don't have much power, right? You're a boxer, you stand with your feet inside your body frame. You might be able to rotate a little more with your hips, get a little more power on the ball. It's a powerful position, or power on the punch. It's a powerful position. So when your foot's outside your frame because the heel is hitting the ground first, your body weight almost shifts backwards and we're going to lose some speed out of the break. So now let's compare that to Calvin Ridley's break, right? So he's coming up, he gets into the break. Watch the first part of the foot that strikes. You see how it's the ball of the foot hitting the ground first. And notice how his whole foot is in the ground. Guys, it's impossible to change direction with, like, while selling fade, because remember, that was the first thing we talked about. We have to sell fade on my routes, whether it's a 5-yard hitch or a 15-yard curl. While selling fade, it is impossible to change direction sharply if your whole foot is not in the ground. So I'm not saying to stand on your tippy toes. I'm not saying to have your heel off the ground. You can absolutely have your heel on the ground, but you got to strike the ground, and the first part of the foot to hit the ground is the ball of the foot, because that is an explosive position. So you look at the difference here at foot strike. You see how this cut is inside of Calvin Ridley's frame. This is a powerful position, and this is a safe position. You guys have to understand, when you guys reach outside your frame like this, like I was saying, when you guys break on your heel first and that heel hits the ground and that toe slaps down, all it takes is for him to be maybe a little bit further, like half a yard, and that leg is going to extend, and that puts a ton of pressure on your knee, your ACL. A lot of bad things can happen when that heel hits the ground first. But more importantly, it makes us slower. So like we said, we look at Calvin Ridley, the foot is inside of his frame. Ball of the foot is striking the ground first. Second step, ball of the foot. Third step, ball of the foot. Everything stays inside of his body frame, so he could push and drive out. It's the same concept on a post, guys. When you break on a post and you're cutting off of one foot, what's the first part that should hit? Ball of the foot. Like, let's rewind it. Let's go back to that out route from Calvin Ridley. Watch what part of his foot hits the ground first. See how it's the ball of the foot? See how this is inside of his body frame and he could push and get out. So guys, foot strike. Foot strike is one of the most important things when it comes down to cutting. And again, there are certain things when it comes down to foot strike that you can't just get overnight, right? Like, a lot of wide receivers think that, I could just walk out there and be able to do this efficiently on the first try. This requires a lot of leg strength. This requires a lot of ankle stability, knee stability. And if you guys want some specific exercises to work on that, like a gym routine that you can do, just post that in the comment section below and we'll send you over one that we have on our website that is specific for wide receivers to work on those things. So if you guys would like that, just again, post that in the comment section below. But this is a textbook example here of the difference between heel striking first and ball of the foot striking first. So now, third route running tip that I want to go over is wide receivers should not drag on their cuts. What they need to do is they need to use something I call opening the car door. Right? I know that sounds a little funny. I know that sounds a little bit weird, but you're going to see what I mean in a second here. So this wide receiver is going to be running a similar route to what we saw Calvin Ridley run. And that is going to be that like speed out route. So it's play at full speed. So he has a great cut. He doesn't reach outside of his frame, but I want to talk a little bit about getting out of the break, right? Because we talked about getting into the break, right? We're trying to make the DB think we're running what? We're running a fade. So we want to make sure that we run hard. We want to make sure that, like this wide receiver, my strides are long. I'm running full speed. I have good pad level at 5 yards. It should be the same pad level at 10 yards. No indicators. Now, a lot of wide receivers, what they would do is when they cut and they're not on the ball of their foot, maybe their heel hits the ground first, their foot's outside their frame, they will drag their back toe. All this turf pops up in the air. Guys, that's slow. What we want to do is I call it opening the car door. Like, you're sitting in the passenger side and you open the door. What does the door do? The door flies around, right? That's kind of what I want you guys to think about doing with your hip that is to the side of the break. See, this wide receiver's on the right side of the field. So he is cutting with his inside foot. His inside foot is his left foot. So in this case, the right leg is the side of the break. He is breaking to the right. So that right foot, you almost want to think of it like you cut, that foot's inside your frame, you're explosive. You are pushing off of this and your right hip is opening. It's almost like putting your leg to a 90-degree L because your next step after the break cannot be a negative step. What I mean by that is that your foot cannot plant on this side of your cut leg because that's going to make us slow. That's going to make us take extra steps to the top. We're not going to have any speed. And all of it ties into that foot strike and staying inside your frame. You guys got to shoot that foot down. We got to stay on the ball of my foot. And as soon as that thing strikes, we're focused on my hip opening and opening up to get that positive stride out of the break. I want to be able to cut. I want to be able to sell vertical. I want to be able to cut on a dime. I want to be explosive with the cut, and then I want to accelerate. I don't want to just get separation on my routes and then lose separation. A lot of wide receivers, like I said, they will reach outside their body frame. Their heel will hit the ground, and this right foot will step over here. His right foot will step over here across his body, and that will make him take extra steps and waste a bunch of time because this cut was not in an efficient position. He was not able to push, and when your feet are inside of your body frame, it makes it very easy for you to open up that car door. So let's play this thing again, full speed one more time. So again, third route running tip, make sure that we are shooting my hips open to get out of any break that requires me to cut off on one foot. Same idea with the post route. Let's say the quarterback's here. You're on the left side of the field. You cut on that post with your left foot, your right hip, you need to open the car door. Maybe it's at a 45-degree angle now, but it's the same idea. I want a positive step out of that break. Okay, so now fourth route running tip, let's talk a little bit about press coverage. Now, press coverage, when we decide to make a move, or this specific example is going to be more so like a physical press coverage DB. Guys who's right up on the line, is not letting me move, not giving me space off the ball. What do I do in this situation? So this wide receiver executes a perfect lateral press release, and that's what you'd want to do in this situation. So I'm going to play this full speed, then we'll break it down. So he comes off the ball, gives a little crossover move, runs this slant route, he's able to get separation. So let's talk about it. Anytime that we're trying to think of a press release or we are trying to use a press release, the two things that determine what press release I'm going to choose are all based around the DB. Obviously, your route matters. Obviously, the situation matters. But the DB is how I decide what I'm going to do off the line. So if I got a DB who's sitting like 2 yards away, let's say he's 2 yards away. He's not like this. He's 2 yards away where I drew this box. And I have to run a slant. What do we got to do with that 2 yards of space? We don't want to just run because then he could cut us off and beat us to the angle. What we want to do is we want to close that 2 yards of distance. There's 2 yards of space. Let's close the space. Let's go try to step on his toes and threaten him with a route. Let's threaten him with some kind of maybe a deeper route, maybe an outside route, whatever it is. Threaten him with a fade like we were talking about at the very beginning. Now this DB's lined up right up on the line. There is no longer any space between the two of us. The DB closes the space. So as we can anticipate, this guy's probably going to try to be physical, and I don't need to close any distance with him. I just have to make him miss. So that is when you would want to make him miss laterally. So watch what this wide receiver does. He does this like crossover move. He does like an inside jab with the front foot, and then he fakes to the outside. But you see how he's not really necessarily stepping past the line of scrimmage. But where he is stepping outside of the DB's frame. So when you step outside of the DB's frame, and by frame, I mean like outside of his shoulder, I think of press releases in this scenario like you got 3 driving lanes. DB's in the middle lane. We're trying to get him to jump to this far right lane. So I got to step all the way to the far right lane to get him to move off that platform. And we do it laterally. Like I said, let's say he wanted to use this exact same crossover move where he jabs with the left foot and then throws with the right foot. But let's say this DB was 2 yards away, right? He was 2 yards off. He would close the space, then do that right-left fake. But now since the DB did it, we don't got to close the space. Let's just make him miss laterally. So again, inside foot, staying behind the line of scrimmage. Now, some of you might be thinking, well, if I step outside of his body frame, wouldn't that be a very big step and wouldn't that make me slow? And it would if you do not bring your upper body with the release. Something I tell my wide receivers to do is when we make a cut, try to throw your hip with the cut. Like your hip in this case, this is his right foot, right? His right hip is attached to his right foot. His right foot steps, the hip goes with it. Then when the hip goes with the step, your upper body goes with it. So now you're stepping outside the DB's frame to make him miss, but because your body went with it, you're in a balanced position to be able to get out of the route. So this is a textbook lateral crossover release. So remember, fellas, the DB dictates what release I choose. If he's right up in my face, make him miss laterally. If he's off 2 to 3 yards, let's close the space and we can attack him a little bit more vertically rather than lateral off the ball. So let's play this again full speed one more time. Great job by that receiver hitting that crossover move and getting some separation. Now, fifth route running tip that I want to talk about is how wide receivers should take what the DB gives them in terms of their press release. So let's talk about what that means. It's a clip here from Travis Hunter in practice, and he is running a dig route, but he has an inside shade press coverage DB. So if you got to run a dig, DB's inside shade, obviously on a dig, a post, a curl, anything inside breaking, what type of release would be more beneficial, inside or outside? Probably inside, right? An inside release is way easier on a dig because this DB will be on your outside hip and you could just break and run. But if this DB's inside shade, he's inside shade for a reason. He's inside shade to protect the inside route. He is taught, do not get beat to the inside, force everything to the outside where you have help, and his help is the sideline. Because if he could force Travis Hunter, let's say Travis Hunter was running a fade route, and let's say Travis Hunter just took off and ran and he forced him to the sideline and he's got like a step to the sideline, guys, that's a perfect play by that DB because that's an impossible throw for the quarterback. So if I have to run a dig, my mindset can't be, okay, because again, you see the space between us and the DB, so what would we have to do? We'd have to close the space. My game plan can't be, I'm going to close the space, give him a fake outside, and then take the inside release. He is not going to give up the inside if he's disciplined. So what we want to do is take what he gives me, which is the outside release. But I have to threaten him to the inside to get him to move. A lot of wide receivers will take what this DB gives and they'll run to the outside and try to do an outside release on a dig. But if we just take off and run, this DB is going to get hands and squeezes to the sideline. So we have to threaten him inside and then take what he gives me to the outside and try to work to do something called stacking. We'll talk about that in a second. But we have to threaten him inside first. So I'm going to play this full speed, then we'll break it down. So Hunter closes the space, threatens him inside, takes this outside release, and stacks this DB and is able to win on this dig. So again, guys, when we have a DB who's inside shade, remember, he's there for a reason. So if we close the distance with him, because that's what we have to do, remember last example, if he's right up on the line, you could just take a quick jab inside, then go. But if he's 2 yards away, we got to eat up that 2 yards of space and go at him. Because when he sees a wide receiver go at him, what's he going to do? He's going to keep his leverage. That's what DBs are taught to do. If you're inside shade and this this receiver goes at you, they're taught to keep their leverage inside. So when you attack him, that's exactly what he does. But guess what? Now I moved him off his platform. I got more space to operate to the outside. Travis Hunter takes this outside release, and we got him. Now, some of you might be thinking, well, coach, what if I can't run around him? What if this DB's faster than me? What if he's right on my hip? We got a plan for that. So you take that inside arm, you put it on the back of his shoulder, back of his hip, you drop your hips, and you slip underneath him. They call that a throw-by move, which is totally legal as long as you don't like push and extend and like push this DB in the back. This is why it's important to run tight to a DB. Travis Hunter is a little bit wide right now. I would like him to be a little bit closer. So if this DB was a little bit faster than him, he would have to slip under, or if he tried to run around him and this DB was quicker, he would force him way deep. So fellas, doing that throw-by move, taking what the DB gives you, or stacking him is the best way to run that inside breaking route versus inside shade press. You have to get comfortable doing those things because when you face a disciplined DB, just running in front of him is not going to cut it. Because again, he's going to get hands, disrupt timing, but let's say Travis Hunter has to run a dig, and let's say this slot receiver also runs a dig. Let's say it's a 2x2 formation, right? If you get forced way to the inside and run your dig and you're right on top of the slot, that is horrible spacing on the play, guys. And spacing is what makes passing concepts and route concepts work. So taking what the DB gives us is not only a way to get separation, it's also a way to keep spacing and timing with your quarterback. So let's play this again, full speed one more time. Again, great job by Hunter attacking off the ball, taking that outside release, and then winning on that dig route.